and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of Klima History. Today we're going to talk about the 13 British colonies, specifically the New England colonies. So this is a 3-part series. So kick back, grab some popcorn, and join us on another fun-filled adventure with Klima History. Alright, today we're going to talk about the New England region of the 13 colonies, specifically the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which later becomes Maine, New Hampshire, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Maine as I call it, which is the bigger part or the main part of this Massachusetts Bay Colony here at the top. Massachusetts, yes, Massachusetts, that's right. Rhode Island and also Connecticut. Now, the Pilgrims land in what is today Massachusetts state, the Massachusetts state, but they land on the East Coast and what they called Plymouth. You might have heard of Plymouth Rock. And they land there basically because they got lost. It was an accident. The Pilgrims landed there in 1620. They were originally supposed to go to Jamestown, which was further south, so they were way off. Now, the reason why they came over to the New World is to escape persecution. They were not happy with the Church of England and the rules that they had established there, and the king didn't want anything to do with it. So he basically gave them a choice. He's like, hey, you're not going to follow our rules, you're not going to be a part of our church, then get out. And so that's what the Pilgrims did. They heard of this new world and they took off. And the Pilgrims had no idea what they were getting themselves into. And so when they landed at Plymouth, they were hungry, they were starving basically, and they found out that there were all these Native American tribes around them. And so the Native Americans, when they stumbled on the white man, they didn't really like them. They didn't trust them. They didn't know why they were there, but they felt sorry for them. And so basically the natives helped them out. The Pilgrims also brought over their women and children, and that's one of the reasons why the natives felt sorry for them. So Thanksgiving did not actually occur at this time. That's a myth. But what do you mean, Mr. Klima? My kindergarten teacher told me that the natives and the Pilgrims, they all held hands and they sat around a table and they ate turkey and corn and mashed potatoes and gravy. Mashed potatoes and gravy is delicious. Anyhow, no, they didn't. That was wrong. They taught you that because that's the way kids learn in elementary school, but that never really occurred. In actuality, this was a political move during the Civil War. The country was so divided during the Civil War that Abraham Lincoln needed a way to unite people. So he brought this idea of a Thanksgiving to give thanks for what people had. And they just ran with it. And later on, it became kind of a holiday that we celebrate. But historically, this really didn't happen as you see in this picture. So let's talk about the characteristics of New England. Now, there are physical characteristics and also human characteristics. Physical characteristics are the things around us in nature, our natural surroundings. Human characteristics are how people interact with those physical characteristics around them, how we change nature, for example, buildings and things like that. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about both. First, we're going to talk about kind of the physical characteristics around us. Now, New England is super cold, and they have very short winters. So because of that, they're going to have to do other things. Also, the soil is not very good for growing crops. If you dig a little deep in New England, you're going to find these massive rocks. And back then, people used those rocks to build a fence, really, a rock fence around their property. If you ever go to New England, you'll see some of that. Also, they had lots of tall trees. These trees were used to cut down and make lumber out of it, to make to make furniture and ships and other things. So if you see in this picture, brace yourself, winter is coming. You know nothing, Jon Snow. That's what they tell me all the time. Anyhow, the economy of New England consisted of subsistence farming. That's farming enough food to eat. Remember I said that New England had very short summers. So they basically could farm enough to eat, maybe like a backyard garden or a small farm around their property. So they had to do other things. For example, to make money, they had to fish. They had to lumber, cut down trees, like I said earlier. They whaled back then. Basically, they hunted whales and used the whale blubber for lamps and oil and different things. They also built ships. With the abundance of lumber around them, they could build ships and sell them to merchants and even back to England. And they were also merchants. They sold different things that they received from England and other areas of the world and sold it in the colonies. So here's a picture of a ship being built. So this is kind of a long process, but it takes a ton of lumber to do. Now, they also, when they came over, had to establish a government. The Pilgrims, they created the Mayflower Compact. Now, we know that they came over on the Mayflower. While they were on the ships, they created a document that spelled out the actual rules they wanted for their colony. And so this was considered to be the first self-government. Later on, when the Puritans come in 1630, they're led by a man named John Winthrop, and they're going to create kind of a religious government. What I mean by that is the minister, the leader of the church, was also the governor who oversaw the rules and things in the colony. And they were extremely strict. This is going to play a role later on, because in this colony, people didn't like the fact that they were so strict. You might have heard of the Salem witch trials that happened in the late 1600s. There's a movie called The Crucible. But this really did happen. They were accusing people of being witches because they were not following the very, very strict rules. And so people left later on and are going to establish the colonies of Connecticut and Rhode Island. They also had the two major cities in this time on the East Coast. We talked about Plymouth already, but in 1630 they're going to establish Boston, which was further north. And remember, these cities were located near the water because of ships, because that's their main mode of transportation. So that's it with the 13 colonies. As you see in this picture, Boston and Plymouth are on the East Coast, and this was extremely important for trade and other things. It was easy access to the Atlantic to go back to England. So that's it on this second edition of Klima History. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the middle colonies and their importance during this time. They're known as the breadbasket. I hope to see you next time for another edition of Klima History. Yeah.